Hello, everyone. This is John Campbell here, a Distinguished Engineer in Db2 development. Welcome to today's client panel around Db2 12. I'm going to be joined by some customer friends out of my worldwide social circle. Today's not the JC show. In fact, it's the panel show because I've got a list of questions that I would like to ask them about the successes and issues or problems related to Db2 12, both the migration and in terms of exploitation. And also, I would encourage you, the customer audience or the general audience today, if you've got any questions, to enter them into the inbox, or sorry, into the Q&A tool. And I'll try and cover these, intermix these with the questions that I have as we go through. So don't wait to the end to do this. Try and do it as we go through, and that way I've got a chance to reach your particular question. Now, the good friends I have today at my customer social circle, there's some very nice pictures of them here. We've got Bob Perry from Citigroup. We've got Dustin Radcliffe from Progressive Insurance, Celia Gagan from Morgan Stanley, Jakob Rauch from Danske Bank, and Bob Vargo from Progressive Insurance, and Ibrahim Parlak from Garanti BBVA, who are a bank in Turkey. So we've got a fair representation here around the world, both in the United States and also in Europe, of people using Db2. But before I start flying through with the questions, what I'd like to do is get each of these to introduce themselves briefly, maybe take 2 minutes to explain about their role and their company and about their use in Db2. So with that said, I'd like to first of all hand over control to my good friend Ibrahim to introduce himself and to introduce his installation. Over to you, Ibrahim. Are you there, Ibrahim? Oh, we seem to have a bit of a technical hiccup here. So what I'll do is I'll come back to Ibrahim. And I'll go fast forward here to Celia to talk about...
Good morning, everyone. My name is Celia Gagan, and I am an executive director at Morgan Stanley in their mainframe computing environment. I have spent most of my career in the financial services industry, and I've been working with Db2 since version 1.2. I'm also a member on the board of directors for IDUG and the president of Tridex, the Db2 user group for the New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut areas. At Morgan, some of my responsibilities include the overall end-to-end architecture of our Db2 platform, as well as the installation and configuration of Db2 and all of its supporting tools that we have in place. I've also spent a lot of time working with the Db2 drivers. So my focus is not just on the mainframe, but also distributed based. We are currently running at M100 and planning to get to M500 later on this year. And as we move forward with it, one of our bigger initiatives is to really start looking at some of the AI type tools. Basically, we really want to be able to have things in our toolbox that will help us predict what's going to happen next so that we can respond quicker. That way, obviously, in the financial services, even a 2 or 3 second slowdown can be noticed. So we go to great lengths to avoid any type of situation like that. Okay. Thank you, John.
Yeah, thanks, Celia. So I'm now going to hand over control to Jacob. Can you please introduce yourself and your installation, please, Jacob?
I can try. My name is Jakob Rauge. I'm a Db2 sysproc from Danske Bank, part of a small team responsible for most things related to Db2 and friends, IDA, QRep, tools, and so on and so forth. We participated in the early support program, but following the completion of that, we got hit by all sorts of projects that delayed our implementation of Db2 12. At this point in time, we're on M501 on all systems and planning for enablement of probably 509 after this. Alongside this, we've migrated IDAs from version 5 to version 7 and have been playing around with things like C hyperlink and logical copy protection. I think that's it for me.
Yeah, thanks, Jakob. And now I'd like to hand control over to Bob Vargo to introduce himself and his installation.
Oh, hello, everyone. I'm Bob Vargo. I work at Progressive Insurance. I'm the Db2 Systems SME. We are currently at version 12, R1 M500, everywhere, and looking to move higher later this year. I am past president now of IDUG, and I'm also the president of our local RUG, NeoDebug. And I've worked with Db2 since version 1.3.
Okay, thanks, Bob. And now I'd like to hand over to your twin brother, Dustin, to introduce himself. Hello, Dustin.
Thanks, John. So hello, everybody. My name is Dustin Ratliff. Hello, can you hear me?
Perfectly, Dustin.
So my name is Dustin. Okay, thanks. So my name is Dustin Ratliff. I also work for Progressive Insurance. I'm a IT systems engineer lead. Been doing DB2 now for about 12 years. I work on the engine itself, DB2 for ZOS. As Bob said, we're currently function level 500 everywhere. And I also work on the DB2 drivers, Data Studio, and all the off mainframe tooling that connects down. Progressive is a fairly Windows-centric shop, and we use a lot of ODBC and OLEDB and various drivers to connect down, and we have a lot of dynamic workload down to the mainframe. So I'm also on the IDUG board of directors and the vice chair or vice president of my local RUG, Northeast Ohio DB2 Users Group.
Thank you, Dustin. And now I'd like to hand over to Bob Perry from Citigroup.
Okay, thanks, John. Yeah, hi, this is Bob Perry. I've been working for Db2. It seems like I work for with Db2 since I guess the late 80s, version 1.3, and we've been involved in every ESP, QPP, whatever they call them now. They're sponsor user initiatives since the mid-90s, version 2.3 of Db2. So one of the things that is important to us is our relationship with the Db2 lab. And as you could imagine, all those years of doing those programs, we've got a pretty good relationship with most of the people out in the lab and the directors out there. And one of the reasons we do this is because, DB2 is one of our key technology strengths. We rely on it for all kinds of different processing. As many times as they've come to us and said, we're moving workload off the mainframe, we're going to Oracle, we're going to Mongo, whatever the flavor of the month is. I don't see our workloads really decreasing. They're increasing, if anything else. And, some of the other things going on now at Citi, I don't know that people read the papers and hear what our new CEO is talking about, but she has announced that we're going to be net carbon zero by, I think, some 2030 or something like that. And one of the bigger problems we have is the server sprawl in our data centers. And, non-mainframes, well, mainframes too use a lot of power, but compared to, some of these x86 servers, they use a ton of power and a ton of cooling is required to basically control, all the heat that they throw off. So mainframes are now something that are being looked at as an alternative to x86 to rehost workloads. And I'm pretty confident there's other companies in financial services doing this, and I think a lot of others will do it as well. But, so that's an interesting fun fact there. We're version 12, across the board, obviously. We're at 500 in most places. We have a little higher than function level 500 for a few, niche applications, not, certainly not widespread. And we're actually at, 510, which I don't even know if that's really GA yet, but, because we're starting to play with some newer technology. We're very large. We have many, many subsystems and data centers across the world. I'm not allowed to give exact numbers, but it is upwards of 100 production DB2 subsystems, upwards of 30,000, upwards of 10,000 production databases. So that's as good as I can do there. And it's just challenging. We have every type of workload that hits DB2, we basically support. And some of the things we're looking at going forward is looking at some of the newer technologies inside of DB2 to continue to grow the workload, educating our user base that DB2 is available for all kinds of workloads, not just, if you're distributed, you don't have to just use Java. You can use a ton of different ways to get to us. And, the true HTAP capabilities that we've seen with IDAA and the newer, features that came out with it, like synchronous integrated replication, it's the tip of the iceberg of what we can do with DB2. So that's our story in hopefully 2 minutes or less.
Thank you very much, Bob. And hopefully, I did mislay one of the customers today, which is Ibrahim, and I hope he's back online now. So Ibrahim, hopefully you're back online. Could you introduce yourself and your installation, please?
Sure. John, can you hear me, by the way?
Perfect.
Right
Perfectly.
now?
Perfect.
Yeah. I had a problem for my connection. Sorry for that, as usual. And hello again, everyone. I'm Ibrahim, and I'm working as a database manager at Guarantee BBVA Z environments. And right now we are also trying to build a new kind of an architecture platform based on the open sources and the microservices. And I'm also leading the database administration part within our new architecture platform as well. And the main responsibility of our team is management of DB2 database systems, and we continue to develop analytics and the replication solutions by using the IDA and the IIDR along with the DB2 systems as well. To briefly introduce the company, Guarantee, operating as a part of the BBVA group and is the second largest private bank in Turkey. It's also the largest C customer in Turkey within a global operation. We have over 60 million active customers, and close to 14 million are also among our digital customers. When we look at our mainframe infrastructure, we have two different data centers. One is located in Istanbul and the other one is in Ankara, almost 500 kilometers between each other. And we have two different Z50 machines with 144,000 MIPS capacity in Istanbul. All our DB2 databases within all different environments are now in version 12 with function level 504. And as of today, our maintenance level is about 507. And we will be planning to be there as a function level within the third quarter of this year. In the main DB2 data sharing group, just the quick numbers, sort for the bank and its financial companies, we have around 60,000 tables with 500 terabyte compressed data. And 2 months ago, 5th of April, we broke our previous transaction record with 1.7 billion. The average daily transaction number is about 1.5 billion in our shop. And almost 180 billion SQL is running per day in our system and generating around 3 terabytes of daily DB2 log data. And we also replicate 300 gigabytes of this data to the other target systems, such like Kafka and Oracle. The overall response time is around 23 milliseconds, and we previously disabled using Z hyperlink. And by enabling this feature again, soon I believe we will be bringing those response times to an even better point. And quickly about our future goals. Now we are in the POC process of IBM Db2 ZAI, which we believe will be the most powerful era for Db2 in the near future. And we are working closely together with the IBM teams about our findings and the potential enhancements and the feedbacks and so on. And as Bob mentioned, we are also trying to implement new in-sync technology by using the IDA and Cloud Pak to get benefit from our static DB2 and distributed JDBC read-only transactions by decreasing the CPU consumptions. It's such a great pleasure to be here today, John, with you all, and thank you for listening to me today.
Thank you very much, Ibrahim. But be on your mettle here, because my first question I'm going to direct in your direction. If I remember correctly, you're a big fan of dynamic plan stability for your dynamic SQL. Could you say a little about your experiences and how you've exploited dynamic plan stability?
Yes, of course. And actually for me and my team, dynamic plan stability was one of the few striking features of this new version. As I mentioned earlier, we are now focusing on a new architectural transformation of which the BBVA group is also a part. And this new microservice architecture is in close interaction with our existing environments through JDBC and the REST services. Especially our JDBC workload continues to grow like never before and evolve day by day with the new services. So we had a very strong in-house structure that we have been working on for many years for static applications performance analysis. And we are also trying to implement a project that can do the same thing for the dynamic workload to follow the JDBC statement performance and the trend analysis. So dynamic plan stability at this point occupies such an important place for us. At this stage, we first explain the dynamic queries in our environments within every hour, just for starting, and consolidate them from the dynamic statement cache to load the daily and the historical tables. And again, every hour, the new statements are compared with the previous history values, and we try to catch the anomalies and in the same SQL statements. And at this point, we also, one of the decisions we leave to automation within the algorithm is, so we cache the statements that go above the thresholds we set, and with high daily execution numbers in, and we route them to the catalog by using dynamic plan stability. So far, we have observed an improvement of almost 5% in overall responses for our dynamic queries by using this feature in our shop today.
Okay, Ibrahim, thank you very much. I've now got a question for Bob, and it's Bob Perry from Citigroup. Bob, I know that you have a really large development but also production landscape for DB2, and therefore migrating to a new release or rolling through maintenance on such a large landscape can be very challenging. Can you talk about how you handle the rolling out of maintenance and the migration of a new release across such a large landscape?
Sure. Yeah, thanks, John. Yeah, one of the things that we currently do is, and the version 11 migration, we hit a couple of hiccups, and a lot of it had to do with the things that we didn't do prior to the migration. We'd get some auto rebinds, we'd get some packages that stopped working because they were depreciated on the new release. So what we instituted for version 12 was a very rigorous, basically pre-migration process. Not just the stuff that's documented in the books, but running the the pre-migration DSNT IJPM process, but also an abbreviated version of that, because some of that is there's stuff you need to fix in there because of PTFs or things that have been there. But then there's other stuff in there that definitely are called out to say, all right, this is going to get in the way of my migration. So what we did was we made a mandatory change for at least the week before we did the migration to have a member of my team go in there, run the pre-migration, and then in almost every single case, all the other migrations ran very smoothly, like a week or so later. So that was a big step that we took there. We do a lot of work on making sure we can do online migrations. We have some systems more are in institutional client systems that we do get windows on weekends and we can shut down the systems. But our retail systems, they need to be up 24/7. So we're very used to doing online migrations with no outage at all for customers in some of our larger, banking in Singapore, for example, that can never come down. So, we're doing online migrations. We worked on some enhanced things that came after GA with the lab on as a sponsor user to get even more enhancements in online migrations. But we've been doing that for a long time now. We've been doing it since at least version 9, I believe. Now, the long-term goal, and we've been working with the lab very closely on this for a number of years now, it's probably been about 5 or 6 years, is to use ZOSMF scripts to really turn it into a process that we engineer once and then just execute over and over again via automation. So, there's features coming in the next release of DB2 that's really going to close what we see as one of the last gaps there. We're then going to go and start doing that. Now we have, a script that is engineered once, but it's really up to people to still manually run this. But if we can drive it via automation, which is, our long-term goal, and hopefully we'll get that before we start rolling, vNext into production environments, in a year or 2 years or whatever it is. I think we'll be in really great shape. So. That's
okay, thank you, Bob.
Yep.
So this question's for you, Celia. Were there any challenging issues in the migration to DB2.12, and what areas were they in, and how did you handle them?
Really, for us, we actually had 2 bigger issues. One was just around the client driver. And the sheer volume of upgrades at the driver level that we needed to do, which just involves an extensive amount of testing. We are a mix of both, .NET clients, as well as we have a lot of JDBC. But we did run into issues on the .NET side with some changes within the driver that caused us a significant amount of delay in order to move forward. The other issue that we really ran into, which was a little bit surprising, honestly, was with one of the tools. We do use high-performance unload in our environment. We ran into some problems with that, and we actually needed to wait for, a coding fix from the lab in order to move forward with that. Unfortunately, that meant we then had to introduce the new fixes and then go back and redo a lot of our testing. There's a significant amount of performance testing that we go through for all of our applications. So basically put the brakes on and wait for the coding fixes actually, contribute to some of the delays that we had. But, got past it and, we were able to move forward. So now we're really at a point where we are good with the driver levels that we're at. Although we do need to go and circle back again to do a .NET driver upgrade in order to introduce some new functionality that we're looking for around Sysplex workload balancing.
Okay, Celia, thank you very much. So my next question is from Bob and Dustin from Progressive, and I'll leave you to decide which order you want to take it in. A lot of customers are very interested about how they're actually going to manage Apple Compat. In other words, as they go through the function levels, how are they and what techniques are they going to use to increase the Apple Compat level? So could you talk about how at Progressive you control Apple Compat for the distributed applications and also the static SQL packages and things like native SQL stored procedures?
Hey, John. Yeah, I can take. I'll take the first cut at that, and I'll talk mainly about a lot of the distributed applications. So, what we do at Progressive is we keep a pretty tight realm around our distributed environment. Our philosophy on it is that we actually bind a second collection for the new Apple Compat. And when we bind a second collection, what we then do, we have the way that we control the local catalogs on all of our clients is via some scripting and stored procedures. And what happens is if you run a Db2 install, we have it coded so that it actually calls a set of stored procedures and dynamically passes the machine name to those stored procedures. And then we have a set of tables that can point the clients themselves, and what we use is the various current package set parms for the various drivers, right? Like the db2 CLI.ini has a parm, the db2 ds driver.config has a parm for current package set, and the way that we roll it through our environments is that we're lucky enough that a lot of our clients have a specific, what we call like a wave or a designation to them to give us information on how important they are. For example, like a wave 0 server would be a sandbox server or a not important server, and wave 1, 2, 3, and wave 3 and 4 server would be a production server. So we start at the very beginning and we run our scripts on each of these servers during their maintenance window. We very gracefully update current package set on sets of servers and applications, and we can get as granular as certain prime offs or IDs, or as widespread as, hey, this entire app or the entire shop, and we can very gracefully control their current package set parameters to point them to that new collection. And we roll, again, very gracefully through their non-prod environments and through their QA and gold environments, and then eventually, of course, into their production environments, having them test and do testing along the way to try and find any issues. And then, Bob, you can talk about some of the static stuff and others.
Yeah, so for the static, all the move procedures are handled by a specific group within Progressive, but the DBAs interface with them and control all the binds for static. And so what they've done so far is, and some of this was built quite a long time ago, not to support Apple Compat, just to support any type of bind override. So they treat Apple Compat right now as an override. So when an app wants some kind of new function or something they need a different Apple Compat for, they will put the overrides, and they have essentially an app and tables that control the bind process, and they put overrides in that, and thus as it moves through the environments, it will pick up the right Apple Compat. For native, again, this started even before 12, they would essentially add it into the SQL, right, into the definition, which I'm not as big a fan of, but it was one way to deal with that issue, is to get the Apple Compat they wanted. I know Bob from Citi mentioned the checkout jobs. So typically we do get outages when we migrate, and we will rebind a lot of our static packages that show, from time to time they show up in those jobs, and we do mass rebinds, or either ahead of or as part of the migration. We have not taken that approach thus far with 12, so it's quite possible going forward that we're going to need to do that again, right? Do mass rebinds. We're not sure what will be required for the next version.
Okay, thank you, Bob and Dustin. I've got a question now from the audience, from Perry, and he would like to know from the panel, what's your experiences with implementing Z Hyperlink? Have any of you on the panel implemented Z Hyperlink? And what he's looking for is, what sort of performance improvements you saw with it.
I may take this one, John, if you let me.
Yeah, sure.
for a while before, we have implemented Z hyperlink. I just forgot the whole numbers, but at those times we observed, by the way, we just enabled that feature for the read-only IO attempts. So at those times we observed, as far as I remember, 3 or 2 times better IO response times by using Z hyperlink. But somehow we had some other problems related with that feature, and we need to disable that that part again. And soon we will be, as I said before, planning to activate that feature again in our system. Those were the numbers that we observed.
Thank you, Ibrahim. Does anybody else on the panel would like to add to those comments from Ibrahim?
Yeah, so
Jacob, I can just say we implemented C hyperlink as well in Danske Bank. And actually, in the recent month, we just enabled it across the board in the main production system. But unfortunately, that coincided then with an issue we had with the kicks that sort of we had a perceived CPU increase on all transactions, and that sort of C hyperlink got blamed for that one, so we had to turn it off again. But then we flushed out the kicks issue, and now we plan to turn C hyperlink on again in the coming month.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Bob from Progressive. Yeah, we've been running with hyperlink for quite a while. We have 2 local data centers, and one is a backup of the other. And so it has, we have seen quite a bit of savings IO-wise. Now, prior to it going on, we really didn't have any issues. And we haven't had any issues with it since. We're also starting Hyperwrite, but that right now is only rolled out in dev.
Yeah, and this is Bob from Citi. I mean, we did do a lot of testing with it. I think, in the early days, we were actually working with Akiko and sending her numbers in the lab just to, so they could validate, what we were seeing was, right. And, we have it turned on in quite a few places, and, we've seen some decent performance numbers. This happened, I guess, early last year was when it really started hitting some production systems, so I don't remember the actual numbers, but I think we were very pleased with what we saw. So it was another good benefit.
Okay. So let me go to Jacob then. Jacob, you've been on DB2 version 12 a while now. So can you talk about which features of version 12 you've exploited and that you're really happy with, that have really made an impact at your installation? And were there any things that you were surprised or disappointed about?
Yeah, so as I mentioned in the introduction, we got hit by all sorts of other projects that delayed our DB2 12 rollout. So we haven't really looked into things like dynamic plan stability and such. But so at this point in time, the top score is a really boring one, like transfer ownership. We have a lot of compliance-related stuff that we've sort of pushed to DB2 12 to use this specific feature to clean up old sys-atoms in the DB2 catalog, and we had some old views with public ownership where we needed to transfer the ownership to be able to revoke the public access. And as expected, transfer ownership really came through as an enabler for an easy way to create a procedure to easily clean up this stuff in DB2. So it looks like we're getting to a better place with the use of transfer ownership. And then, of course, there's we're looking at enlarging the log data set to larger than 4 GB log data sets, which we haven't really gotten started on yet, but we're just looking into that now. And then, of course, there's the in-sync to IDA that we've implemented, which looks like a game changer. Not really DB2 12 related, but then again, it came with DB2 12 as well. So, and with respect to the disappointment, that has to be the the fast traverse blocks. We came out of the ESP program, I think, thinking that would be that could be interesting to see in the main production environment, to see what kind of savings we could achieve with that enabled. But then we turned it off on migration based on the recommendations, and we haven't really had time to look into a good way to turn it on again. And we've been following the various PTF that came with it with great interest, and we're now looking at whether it's time to enable it again, especially since it seems we've gotten an option to perhaps enable it at a more individual index level going forward. So I think we'll definitely be looking at that now, but something we came out of the ESP Chrome with thinking that could be really interesting.
Well, I think, Jakob, when you were in the ESP, you did a lot of measurements around the use of fast traverse blocks, and I think you saw some really good improvements, even with the 2-level index. In fact, you saw, was it 9% and then 20%, I think, with the 4-level index. So the initial performance results look really good. Is that fair?
Yep.
And then obviously you then were disappointed with the instability. Performance results are great, but you weren't happy at the time about the stability of the item. I know that Ibrahim on the panel has re-enabled fast traverse blocks, I think. But with any of the other customers, have you re-enabled index fast traversal, and are you happy with the stability?
Yeah, I mean, this is Bob from Citi. I mean, we never disabled it. I mean, every time, we had some problems in version 12. Now, by and large, version 12 was very stable release for us. I could talk about the problems that we did have, but there were a couple of times we'd hit something and I would start thinking, okay, this must be one of those fast traverse block problems. But, we went into it, may sound risky considering I work for a financial services firm, but, I normally try and enable everything that doesn't, change behavior of an application and then wait for it to shake out. We got some really heavy duty environments pre-production. So a lot of times, I wouldn't say that we hit all our problems in non-production, but we can break a lot of stuff. And we never had a problem with it. We didn't have any, if we had a PMR that hit that part of the code, it was very minor and I really don't remember it. So we've had it on everywhere. We did some testing with it again during the ESP. We were very happy with the results. And I see the messages coming out. And, when I go and log on a DB2 system, I'll see the messages coming out that it's in use. And, I haven't really had the time to dig in and say, all right, how much has it helped our production workload? But it's not something that we ever turned off because, I guess we had other problems that we were trying to avoid stuff with. So.
Yeah. So Ibrahim, any comments from you?
Just like the other attendees explained, we also use that feature, and even we didn't observe some critical system outage, but we faced some important incorrect result output. So at the very beginning, we were also within the ESP part, and actually we were getting some real outstanding results coming with that feature at the ESP program, and we were really excited to use that feature within our environment. And once we upgrade the version 12, we started using this feature, but at those times there were just 3 options. You can use the auto and you can disable this one, or you can use the allocated amount of the memory that can be used by the FTB. But to be honest, auto was a bit scary for us, and we didn't use that option within our actual production system. And since we got those kinds of those issues related with the incorrect output, so we just turn it off again and try to follow the FMID and the maintenance stream related with the FTB. And today we are lucky to have the selected option, and we restart using that feature, and at least for 10 indexes within within some sort of specific indexes that can be related with the page size. There are MPIs, there are partition indexes, and for the overall perspective, we got some. We observe almost 20% of better CPU consumptions related with the indexes that we have been turned on again. So it's gonna be exciting to play with that area within our near future.
Okay, thanks, Ibrahim. So this is John here. I'll make a few comments about this, and I have to be respectful of customers who may be who are on this webcast today, who may have suffered some serious problems. I mean, there's no doubt that index fast traversal can generate really impressive performance savings, CPU performance savings, and there's no doubt that performance sells and everybody wants it. But unfortunately, for the first couple of years, at least in the life of DB2, there were some problems that were vicious in nature, and people, if they hit the risk, actually got burnt by it. But what I would say is, in the past 15 months at the lab, we've worked tirelessly to improve the stability of this item. And so all known internal and external problems raised have been addressed. We've marked things hyper when they need to be. And I think the stability of this item has improved tremendously. First of all, let me say is, I think the problems are fewer. I also think the problems are less impactful. But nevertheless, there is a recent hyper which could take a subsystem out. But having said that, the risk of hitting that problem is incredibly low. And I would say now there are people using it, and they've been using the recipe that I suggested to Ibrahim, which is to go in with a select number of indexes where you limit the number of indexes that are using that feature, and you specify the particular amount of memory you want. And you can use the enhancement, which is the display interval count, so you know what are the good Candex indexes. And people have had a good experience, not just with the performance, but also with the stability. I think some customers are just hypersensitive now about the history of FTP, and they want the zero risk option. And we know in software there's never the zero risk option. So what I think we've got a special fixed category related to index traversal FTP. You should monitor that. And recently I had calls as part of a customer engagement. They went to RSU 2103. They were missing 5 fixes out of that fixed category. And actually, 4 of them were non-hypers, and so therefore, and not particularly impactful. And there was this one which was related to a subsystem of bend, but it's a very rare condition. And despite the fact they've been in production with this level, they've not seen any problems at all. So I would recommend to all the customers there to give this a try, introduce it in a selective way, but please make sure you're vigilant about the fixed category for fast traversal, and you make sure you have all the recommended hyper maintenance on. There's a question for me about what is my favorite features in DB212. And I'm afraid it's hard to restrict it to one, but I'll start with a simple one, which is basically the bind break-in feature that came in function level 505. And why is this? Well, it might be you're using plan stability, and all of a sudden you've done a rebind, and there's been an access path change that's really negative. Well, now you can break in and use the rebind phase in to switch back to the previous copy, and you can do that in a non-disruptive way without impacting the transactions. And as the threads get recycled or there's new thread allocations, they will pick up the new package copy. And also you might want to do this because you have an opportunity to improve the access path. So rebind phase in is certainly would be in my top 5. I really like the dynamic plan stability for those people using dynamic SQL. And despite its troubles, index fast traversal is a very impressive piece of technology and can really have a big performance impact. And I think we're working towards stabilizing, or I would say we've stabilized this item. And yes, there will be some more defects, but I don't see any prevalent problems, and I don't see the vicious problems we had before. So I'd encourage you to take a second look at that. So let me go back to Ibrahim again. I know you were interested in the Autobind feature where we introduced API Reuse warn is that every time you do an Autobind, we will apply API Reuse warn, when it happens, I should say. So are you happy with that feature, Ibrahim?
Exactly, yes. Especially for the ones that, as guarantee, we just have not yet been able to convert all our tables to the UTS. So especially since the need for the package invalidation still exists in segmented table transformations, Autobahn application access path change could be a nightmare for us. And although we have an automation process that catches the access path change and quickly switch it to the previous and the better access path, the immediate effect that could sometimes cause significant problems and costs. And with the Autobind API Reuse support, especially in the master and the core applications that are accessed heavily after UTS, we were able to prevent the access path change and possible service effects. So on the client side, as you mentioned before, the rebind phasing and this one, the Autobind API Reuse, we will have quite significant development here. And I just would like to thank you all for these extraordinary innovations. We are more than happy to have those kinds of features in our shop today.
Oh, excellent answer, Ibrahim. I think the developers will enjoy that. Yeah, I mean, they always like good news, right? Normally developers only hear about bad news, about defects that they have to fix. So it's good that they get some positive feedback about good things that have been done. So I'm going to go back to Bob from Citigroup and ask Bob, what are the application and business requirements that have resulted in you moving above function level 500 with Db2
Okay, there were a couple of them. One of our applications, we implemented, they had an audit requirement to move to pervasive encryption. And although when we did it in production, they ended up hardening it in the SMS rules, we did do testing with them, and we'll be looking in the future to use M502 to basically make that something that we can control in the DDL, because I think that's better if you're going to do to me, if you're going to do a whole subsystem or something like that, then putting it in the SMS rules probably makes sense. But if you're just going to do a couple tables like this app did, it probably makes it better sense to have it under the control of a DBA group, so that we can use DDL then to basically specify that we're going to be using pervasive encryption, and then run the reorgs, of course, to enable it. We also hit something. There was an application that was using some temporal features, and it also uses Db2 replication. When we went into version 12 with this, or actually when they went production, I think this probably would have failed in version 11 as well, or maybe not, I don't know. But we hit a problem. So to get that fixed, we actually worked with the lab and became a sponsor user for what turned out to be something in M503, which is a global variable that you can override replication for some temporal features. And then, of course, well, not of course, but the final one was something that we're now running in a production system, which is the integrated synchronization feature, which required M500. We have an application that is basically in production now. It's actually, we have it set up in production, but the app part of it will be going live towards the middle of next month. And it's going to be doing, the real near-term or real-time replication that is only possible within Sync. I mean, I know this isn't an IDAA call, but this is a feature that is only available in version 12, M500 and above. So, that feature, along with the true HCAP capability that comes along, hand in hand with that, is really a huge game changer for IDAA and Db2 in general, I think. So those are our three where we've kind of, had to go above M100 rather, sorry.
Okay, Bob, thank you. There's another question from Perry. It may be a different Perry, which is about the status of IAG2, Insert Algorithm 2. And I will take this because it's a lab view. nobody, they can repeat that, nobody should be using insert algorithm 2 at this point in time. It's still under the protection of the res alert, just like we did with fast index traversal. We are working to stabilize that, and we're not in a position right now where we would recommend anybody turning it on. So that's the first thing to say. So don't use it for the moment until you hear something from the lab announcing that you should use it. And the second thing, I just want to get people's perspective on this. Remember, this only applies to table spaces with member cluster and specifically universal table space. So by definition, this is a niche solution, okay? And when I do look across many customer systems, there are not that many table spaces with member cluster. And the way I view insert algorithm 2, it's a bit like member cluster on steroids, okay, where you have lots of current threads inside the same system. So it can be valuable, and there are use cases out there where when this is working properly and with stability, where it can improve insert throughput. But to recap right now, nobody should be using it. We do have a fixed category for it already, and APARs are being put into there as they are added and closed out. You may want to try it in a pre-production environment for some specific cases, but I would not be using that in production at this time. A question for Dustin and Bob. So do you have a method or process that you use prior to migration in production to determine the access path changes for dynamic SQL?
Yeah, so John, what we have done in the past is we utilize the fact that we had another data center where we use XRC. We would bring up our mirror systems and test there. And the basic method we use is we would capture large amounts of SQL, either through tracing or through unloading from the cache. And then we would play that back wrote a program to play it back at the current version on the mirror system and use explains for every statement, and unload the tables, the plan tables, migrate, and then run the process again. And so we were able to then compare. We took kind of a warehouse or view of all of the explain data, looking for differences by for each app. We tended to focus on our major applications. We have I don't know, close to maybe 2,000 servers. So we did tend to focus on the major apps. That has in times led to other issues where we did not catch things, but it did work, and it did show us either that we had stability going into the migration or that we had some things we had to fix. So that's we have now unfortunately moved to away from the XRC environment, so we don't have that going forward. More than likely, we'll try this with profiling for the apps and do it in dev as opposed to using the actual mirror production system.
Yep. And the only thing I'll add to that, John, is that mirrored that disaster recovery system was fantastic to test out the migration process itself, right? So going into the migration process, we had a really good feel that, hey, listen, I'm not going to run into any issues in the middle of a potential outage window. So we exercised the entire migration, not only in our production, but also our non-production systems. And then even we're able to, once the migration took hold, bump it up to various function levels. We're able to see the catalog changes behind the scenes and really have ourselves right ahead.
And we were also able to run select batch cycles and things like that on the mirror system after the migrations. So it came in very handy.
Okay. There's been a number of questions from people about, are we going to provide a transcript of today's webcast, and is it available afterwards for people to listen to it? So the answer is the whole of this webcast has been recorded, the entirety of it, and it will be available on replay, plus a copy of the slides. picking a question that came in, another question that came in, has anybody used system monitor profiles to direct distributed connections to DB2 driver collections with a specific Apple compat level? And I'm jumping the gun here, but I suspect the boys from Progressive may be able to answer that. Maybe not.
Hey, sorry, John. Was having trouble with the mute button.
All right, then. Off you go, then.
So, yeah. So we have not used the profiles for the Apple compat levels. As I said earlier, we tend to do that stuff at the client level using the current package set. We have messed with the profiles themselves for some connection throttling and some other things, and have gotten a little bit of mixed results there, but we have not done it with the actual Apple compat levels at all.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, this is
John, I can jump in here.
Yeah, you go, Celia.
Well, our plan is to manage it all through profiles. Right now, we don't have that in place. We're in the middle of or getting started with that, since right now for M100, we're all at the same level. But we do use the profiles extensively right now as far as monitoring connections. Have had mostly good results with it, although using profiles and hitting profiles if you've got RSM turned on is not a recommended approach. We did have issues with that. So for larger, shops, if you've got the ability to, I believe the recommendation is now to keep RSM set to no. We did see an increase in CPU usage when we hit a profile limit with RSM set to auto. But moving forward, each of our applications does have a set of profiles associated with it, and they'll be picking up the Apple compat version for the drivers from that.
And this is Jacob from...
yeah, you go, Jacob, please.
No, it's just I think we're sort of trying to do the same thing. We are using profiles to set the Apple compat, and we plan to use it as a vehicle for setting this going forward as well, directing different connections to a default Apple compat or fencing something at a particular level.
Okay.
But we're not setting Apple compat, we're setting the package set.
Yeah, exactly, Jacob. So I was about to say that I've got many customers in my social circle that are using system monitor profiles to actually switch collections. So in other words, either move all applications to a different collection, or moving individual select applications to a different collection. And that's several things. Is one, they want to selectively allow that application to go to a collection which has got a specific Apple compat, which is what Jacob was just talking about. Also, people want the opportunity to rebind the DB2 Connect and driver packages that are in null ID. So, for example, they will rebind those packages into another collection called null ID2, and then they'll use a system monitor profile to move all the workload over to null ID2, and that enables them to rebind and replace the packages in null ID. And when they're finished, they'll be able to remove that system monitor profile, and everything will go back to null ID. Also, when it comes to high performance DBATs, which is a really nice performance opportunity in DB2, then similarly, you would have a particular collection where the packages are bound with the release deallocate. So in the null ID collection, which is the default, everything would be release commit. And then select applications would be moved to a different collection where those packages are bound with release deallocate. And so people are using that way, as I said, to recap, way to break in and rebind the null ID packages, to selectively use high-performance DBATs, and then the other thing is to selectively point applications to particular collections or they will pick up a particular Apple compat level that they want to use. Looking for a question from the audience again. I've done that one. There's a question from Jose Paul, which I will take. He's asking me, asking us, is the APAR PH38212, is it critical? Well, Jose Paul, that depends on whether you want the no risk answer, the zero risk answer, or you want a balanced answer. So that's the one that I was alluding to that can cause a subsystem to crash. So obviously, if the risk hits, you lose the subsystem, okay? But the chance of hitting that window is pretty small. Didn't say zero, it's pretty small. So if you want the zero risk option, you must apply the PTF of that APAR. If you've got a balanced approach to risk, then you can take your time and then accelerate that PTF into production later. Let me look for some more questions here. So this is a general panel question here. What is the member of the panel's philosophy regarding the activation of V12 function levels? It seems some have more conservative approach than others. So can I hand that over to maybe some of the panels, or should I just maybe I should make some introductory comments. For what I'm observing, how fast people move through those function levels, I don't mean code levels, function levels, depends on technical and business need. So a lot of customers in my social circle wanted to accelerate to 505 because they want that rebind phase in. Other people may have gone to 502 because they wanted the in DB2 support for transparent data encryption. And there are other features. So it really depends on the technical and business needs, and that will determine the pace at which they go. So let me hand it over to the members of the panel and allow them to chip in about what their philosophy is about migrating through the function levels. Seems I've stumped the panel.
I'll talk. No one else wants to. Oh, go ahead, Celia.
Okay, go ahead. No, I was just going to say, obviously as a, financial, services, we are extremely risk averse. But that doesn't mean that we want to really, stay where we are. We really need and want and looking to get to 505, particularly for the, the rebind phase in. So the plan is that we will, get to 500, and then we are not going to step through all of the function levels. We will, really push forward to get to 505. And then the apps that need particular functionality will, our change process will allow them to specify, the Apple compat, on their bind cards to get to, the functionality that they need. But at the same time, it's not something that we would move everyone across the board at an application level.
Thanks, Celia. Anybody else would like to chime in?
Yeah, so this is Bob at Progressive. So we haven't really had business drivers, and that, as John mentioned, would be one of the things I think that would push us along. What we intend to do, though, we had a lot of infrastructure changes last year that we had to deal with, so we didn't move as aggressively as we have in the past, even to get to a new function, so to M500. We're there now, but what we intend to do is to push the cat main up to the highest level that makes sense relative to our maintenance, our current maintenance. So we will be going to, I think, 509. We've been at 507 for quite a while. So we intend to push up to 507 cat main wise, and then we can activate underneath that when we have the need, from the apps.
Anybody else got any comments to make?
So just a quick question from our side. As you described and as Bob mentioned, actually business and the system requirements are driving this principle. So at least for 502, the regulations in Turkey was expected us to use some kind of an encryption. So we need to be there to control that part by using our DB2 skills. And that's why we need to go forward to 502 once we were in 500. And today we will be using, we know that will be valuable for us to use that rebind phasing algorithm. So at this time, we are preparing to be there on 505 to get that kind of feature. So those are the requirements in our shop is driving the function level upgrade process.
Okay, so I'm going to move on. This will be our final question today. And this is a question from Carol. She'd like to know how people have been cleaning up run stats. And I'm interpreting this, that what she means by this is that it's stale, obsolete run stats. And she says, the question is really about when should that cleanup happen, or should she wait to function level 508 before she starts? Does anybody want to take a stab at that? Okay, no volunteers. Okay. Well, I'm making an assumption about your question, okay, Carol, that this is, as I said, this is stale, obsolete run stats. And the point is, are you going to exploit, statistics profiles? So statistics profiles provide an holistic solution once you get into version 12. So previously, hardly anybody used them, and they will start using them in DB2 12. And in DB2 12, if the EPOM set appropriately, we will automatically, DB2 will automatically create those profiles for you at the first bind, the first prepare, the first explain, and so on. So regardless of whether it's automatic or it's manual, then when those profiles are created after you've gone into version 12, or if it was manual even on version 11, any statistics for that object are immediately going to be hardened in that profile. Now, you may or not use the profile, but the profile has all those statistics hardened in them, right? Now, if you then start doing a reorg and specifying to use that profile, you will be collecting all those statistics. So the point I'm saying is a lot of installations have, in fact, collected an awful lot of statistics over the years and didn't continue collecting them. They maybe thought this would solve my problem, and it didn't, but they never cleaned up. Or it may be your favorite consultant or even the IBM care team, client success team, told you to collect them, and either it didn't work for you or it was too expensive to collect. So the danger is therefore, whether it be manually or automatically creating those statistics profiles, then they'll start being collected again. And so with them being collected again, in a way, that's a good thing, in the sense, and I say in a sense, that everything then is on the same time. Whereas previously, you've got time difference between the different statistics. But these statistics might be very expensive to collect. Okay, so that's one thing. And the other thing, even if the statistics are cheap to collect, it will aggravate the cost to prepare and bind. So my view is that you shouldn't wait to function level 508. You should start doing that as soon as possible. I was hoping in the early days of version 12 with my webcast that people would start that cleanup under version 11. So I wouldn't postpone that decision. And one message I will give you, collecting stats generally is cheap, okay? However, it does aggravate the cost of prepare and bind. And I don't think, particularly in the case of prepare, you actually want to do that. We've got just a couple of minutes left. Is there any member of the panel would you like to make some closing comments?
I just want to say thank you.
Well, you've all done really, really well, okay? And I'd like to thank you all for taking the time here out of your schedules to practice using this technology today. I've got 6 friends who now understand what it's like to do a webcast with IBM about what happens behind the scenes and the difficulties and how things work. So I'm pleased for that. And now hopefully more people will have sympathy for me in trying to do that. But I would like to thank all 6 of you for taking time out, being very generous with your time, and hopefully we can do this again. So with that said, I'd like to thank all the attendees today. And if you really like this type of webcast with the customer panel, please let us know in the feedback, and we'll organize another webcast like that in the future. So with that said, final thank you to everybody for, who sponsored this webcast, and please take care out there. Bye for now.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.